Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering Disney. I can't believe the takedown that this author did on Disney's Lucasfilm. He notably didn't really blame Bob Iger, and I hold Bob Iger responsible for, of course, acquiring Lucasfilm and making sure that the transition from George Lucas to Disney was smooth and that everything was being done with respect for the material and that the new material would be good and that it would have a great future no matter even what happened to Bob Iger. That's an incredibly big responsibility, and Bob Iger did not live up to any of it. But this article, while Bob Iger pretty much gets an easy go of it and is almost made out to be a victim, absolutely wrecks Disney's Lucasfilm in a way I've not seen before in public. If this writer was being contracted by the board of directors or by Bob Iger to go ahead and make the case for the board of directors to step up and say, we need to get rid of Kathleen Kennedy so that Bob Iger didn't have to do it himself, I can't see anyone doing a better job of doing it than he did in this article. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications and give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. I'm trying to get the subscribers up to 25,000, so if you can subscribe, please do subscribe. From Fortune, which is a major business publication, and I haven't seen anything so negative on Disney in a major business publication in recent memory. The Force has left Lucasfilm. What has gone wrong for the studio behind Star Wars and Indiana Jones, and how Disney's Bob Iger can salvage his $4 billion investment. Bob Iger flew to the Cannes Film Festival supporting Harrison Ford's Dial of Destiny, the fifth film in the Indiana Jones franchise. Lucasfilm had just premiered the fifth installment of Indiana Jones, and a lot is riding on it. This is the end of the Indiana Jones franchise. They've made that announcement from Disney. They don't plan on doing more with Harrison Ford, but they don't even plan on doing more with other characters that could be part of the world of Indiana Jones. They spent $300 million making this movie, not making and promoting. $300 million making this movie, so it needs to be successful, but it doesn't look like it's going to be successful. Initial reviews are suggesting it could bomb big at the box office when it hits theaters on June 30th. Iger acquired Lucasfilm for just over $4 billion. Iger acquired Lucasfilm for Disney for just over $4 billion a decade ago. And it was a great deal. Star Wars is an incredible, iconic franchise that you can't recreate for $4 billion, $5 billion, or $100 billion. It is what it is. It permeated the culture in a way that very few other brands have. Marvel did it, but really very few other brands are as well known as the Star Wars brand internationally. And the merchandising for Star Wars was phenomenal. Disney also at the time was doing a great job with its merchandising. It had an incredible licensing business, and Disney licenses were more expensive than comparable licenses, and people just understood it that way. If you were to make toys or towels or anything with Disney products on them, you would pay more on a percentage basis for those than you would pay from any other studio or any other licensing company. And Disney was able to justify that because anything with Disney brands on it sold at that level. It's hard to even go back and remember that before Iger was allowed to mess up all of Disney's brands, they really were incredibly powerful, and a license to produce Disney licensed merchandise was really a license to print money. Even so, Lucasfilm had a powerful licensing business, but under Disney, Disney's distribution was incredible for its licensing in every corner of the market. And every time Disney would acquire brands, including when they acquired Marvel brands, all of their properties would go in at that higher Disney licensed price level, and they were able to distribute it among even more manufacturers and licensees that otherwise wouldn't have had access to those brands. Marvel had a great licensing division, but it was nothing compared to what Disney was able to do with Marvel. The third Skywalker trilogy started off well in 2015 with The Force Awakens. It actually made money, and it felt like Disney would know how to make Star Wars movies. But little did we know at the time, their plan was to make something that kind of looked and felt like a Star Wars movie to transition us away from classic Star Wars into this new Force is Female Star Wars under Kathleen Kennedy, really ruining the franchise. 4 years after 2015, in 2019, when the last Disney Star Wars movie was made, that did not do so well. And they've been struggling ever since to come out with another Star Wars movie that fans would be interested in or that they could realistically make money on. Quote, "The Force has left Lucasfilm," said Eric Scheifer, CEO of private equity firm Patriarch Organization, in an interview. That emotional connection it enjoyed with fans has been damaged. Incredible assessment from this guy, Eric Scheifer. He really seems to understand exactly what's wrong with Disney's Lucasfilm and with the Star Wars brand. The Los Angeles-based media industry investor and self-admitted Star Wars fan, and that's what really helps give him the insight. He's a finance guy, but he's a finance guy that knows and loves the Star Wars brand. He still counts the deal to acquire Star Wars and Lucasfilm as a success for Iger. And so do I. It's just been really mismanaged. It's an incredible deal for any amount of money to get control of a brand that people love worldwide. But Scheifer believes that Disney got off track because they were overproducing tons of subpar content for Disney+. More importantly, though, he really gives it away and explains this is what's missing from Star Wars. To get the Force back, Lucasfilm needs to reconnect with its Joseph Campbell roots, inner set of mythologies we're all hardwired to that motivated Lucas to create Star Wars in the first place. And what he's talking about is the hero's journey, the basic story of Luke Skywalker starting out as a restless teenager that wants to leave his small town, go out on an adventure, gets mentored, has challenges, overcomes them, and winds up becoming a hero that benefits his larger community, in his case, the whole universe. That is what the hero's journey is. If you Google the hero's journey, if you're not familiar with it, you'll see it's fascinating. And it's been across cultures. It's not just Star Wars. George Lucas has said he consulted Joseph Campbell, who developed the model of the hero's journey and exactly designed Star Wars to fit that model. Disney Plus was launched on Star Wars. The Mandalorian was successful initially. Of course, they started to ruin it over time. Now Disney Plus has lost 4 million customers in the last 3 months through March. Not all of them were US customers, but it's still a major issue for Disney to lose subscribers to Disney Plus. They need the numbers to go up, not down. Wall Street investors now want Iger to figure out how to stop losing over $11 billion on their streaming business and turn it around. And it really doesn't look like it's that possible to turn around. Factoring in marketing and distribution costs, including movie theaters' cut of receipts, it's likely going to need $900 million at the box office for Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny just to break even. That just can't happen. The board of directors brought Iger back to get Disney back on track, get the stock back up, to resume cash dividends being paid to stockholders. Iger needs to figure out how to churn out family-friendly movies full of iconic characters that people will never forget, that will also go and power their flywheel, as Nelson Peltz called it. Quote, "The value of intellectual properties cannot be measured simply in a franchise's box office receipts," said Guy Bisson, co-founder of the media industry research firm Ampere Analysis. "You need to take into account its contribution to the streaming business, in merchandising, in the characters, and in the theme parks." For example, Disney finance chief Christine McCarthy explained to investors something seemingly mundane as a refreshment can squeeze more revenue out of each Disney World visitor if they can be turned into a Star Wars themed experience. So you know that they understand at Disney the basic concept, and it's incredible because you would think that they forgot or they just didn't care anymore, but they do understand that the characters are supposed to be powerful enough and interesting enough that what happens at the movie theater makes people want to buy t-shirts, support streaming services, even buy drinks, Star Wars sandwiches, whatever it is they can sell with their branding attached to it to have people enjoy and relive the experience. That's what licensing and merchandising is supposed to all be about. But the problem is Disney went ahead and instead of making the meaningful content that it used to make got wildly off track after these acquisitions, and then allowed all of the managers who were in charge of all the brands to go ridiculously woke, destroying what made the characters important and feel real as individual characters, completely reducing the value of all of their intellectual properties. Now Disney has tremendously high overhead and they're producing schlock. And you can produce schlock and you can make money. That can be the business model. The problem for Disney is their business model is to produce high quality content with iconic characters that are then sold and resold through licensing departments, through theme parks, through other brand experience opportunities. They're trying the hotels again. And you can't do that with schlock content. Ultimately, they're going to have to turn it around whether they like it or not, or they're going to have to completely cut back on overhead and expenses to the point of forget about 7,000 layoffs. You're talking about 30, 40, 50,000 layoffs. However many employees they have, they need about 80% less of them in the main office if they're not going to go back to producing iconic characters because their business model does not support it. They're just making junk. Check out how the author of this article treats Iger like a victim in all this. But whether he's a victim or not, what's the difference? Because of the drop-off in interest in Star Wars, Iger and his studio boss, Alan Bergman, are now in a difficult position. The Disney CEO has not spared high-ranking figures like Marvel's Ike Perlmutter or Victoria Alonso from The Axe. He has demanded results from his teams in exchange for greater creative control. Quote, there needs to be a direct connection between what's being spent and what's being earned from a revenue perspective. It's all about accountability, Iger said in March. But where's the accountability for Iger? I think Iger's being let off the hook a little too easily here. But it's true. If he delegates the responsibility to Kathleen Kennedy and she can't even get movies out, much less good movies out, of course she can't stay with the company. Older Star Wars fans want to see Kathleen Kennedy go in favor of someone like Jon Favreau, the Iron Man director and creator of The Mandalorian. Allegedly, negotiations over whether to renew her contract, due to expire next year, are slated for this August. Quote, my bet is she stays, just with a different mission, wages Schiffer. The problem isn't Kathleen Kennedy. That is where I would definitely disagree with Schiffer. Kathleen Kennedy is the one that came in and started saying, the Force is female. We're going to remake Star Wars so that everyone of every gender loves Star Wars. That's actually impossible. There may be some creative genius somewhere, and it certainly isn't even George Lucas, who could come in and reinvent Star Wars, but keep it still Star Wars, but make it appeal to everyone, but focus on representation, but get rid of all the classic characters, but still make it amazing and still make it Star Wars. That's what she said she was going to do. And then Bob Iger signed off on it and said, sure, go give it a shot. It sounds like that ought to work. I'll just make you accountable for it, which she really didn't do because she's been a failure ever since she started releasing Star Wars movies that fans didn't like. That's how you would judge whether it was successful or not. Not even whether it made money or not, because you're in the business of continuing to make the movies. It's not a one-time thing. And as said earlier, you need merchandising based on this. People who don't love it, who aren't really passionate about it, are not going to buy merchandise and experiences based on those brands. There's been some discussion about Disney selling Lucasfilm. The odds of them selling Lucasfilm are really about zero. There's a much higher chance that all of Disney could be sold or merged with another large company, but they're not going to sell it off piece by piece. It just doesn't make sense for the business. And they're not going to admit that they can't run the business. What you can start to see is that media articles like this come out criticizing Lucasfilm, giving Iger a pass, essentially saying, hey, it's not his fault. It's the manager he put in place to do this. And I know George Lucas put her in place, but Iger kept her in place. Ultimately, what this shows us is this is how powerful Kathleen Kennedy actually is. It feels like this article supports the board of directors going in and saying to Kathleen Kennedy, we do not want you to stay with the company, allowing Iger to kind of sidestep all of this and not have to take the responsibility for firing her. And we also don't know exactly what all their deals are. It may be that Iger doesn't even have the authority to get rid of Kathleen Kennedy. Maybe something that has to come from the board of directors, and come this August when her contract time is up and after we've seen what's going to be a completely disastrous release of Indiana Jones Dial of Destiny, that's the time we'll see how this all turns out. I do agree with this one controversial comment from Schiffer, who says, quote, "The failure here, this is not forever. If another film turned out to be good, the fans will be there. In fact, they'd be there first." I think he's right. And I know people have said, I'm done with Star Wars. I'm not interested in Star Wars. Disney has ruined it. But again, if you think back and you remember how everybody felt before The Mandalorian came out, that's how they felt. Star Wars was dead. Nobody was interested in the brand. It'd been ruined by Kathleen Kennedy. But The Mandalorian was cool in its first couple of episodes, and they had some interesting ideas. They brought in their Baby Yoda. It got a lot of interest. It drew a lot of attention. Star Wars fans were willing to take a look at it and support it. And that is the power of a really well-defined, iconic brand that Star Wars actually does have and still has. If something amazing comes out, people will hear about it. And if it honors and it really is Star Wars, I believe also it will do well. Get rid of Kathleen Kennedy and bring someone else in to just do Star Wars the way that Star Wars was intended. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Do you agree that this article is probably a little too easy on Bob Iger, but also does lay out some great examples and great reasons why and great explanations of what to do with Kathleen Kennedy, how to bring the brand back, what the brand really ought to be and ought to represent? Definitely let me know in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please also be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications and give me a thumbs up. And I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.